The honourable member from Cowichan-Malahat-Langford.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And before I begin, I wish to notify you that I will be splitting my time with the honourable member for North Island Powell River. Although this is not the first time I have spoken in this honourable House, it is my first official speech, as I take my turn in participating in the debate on the reply to the speech from the throne. I would like to start by thanking the great people of Cowichan-Malahat-Langford for the trust and responsibility they have placed on my shoulders. It is truly an honour to stand here in our nation's Parliament and represent my community, and I will work hard during the course of this 42nd Parliament to make sure that my riding has the federal representation it deserves. I would also like to take time to acknowledge my family and my friends. 1 year ago today, I was nominated as the NDP candidate, and it was their love and support that kept me going through what seemed to be a never-ending campaign year. I come to this House as a member of the Progressive Opposition, the New Democratic Party, where I will be constructively holding to account the new Liberal government to ensure that they follow through on their promises to Canadians. As our former leader, Jack Layton, once said, "I've always favoured proposition over opposition. We will oppose the government when it's off track. We will support positive suggestions that we'll bring forward and support the government when it's making progress." The Liberals were given their governing mandate based on ambitious commitments, and I sincerely hope that they will fulfill them. The speech from the throne expanded on some of these commitments, and I certainly appreciated seeing the references to First Nations, the Canada Pension Plan, post-secondary education, employment insurance, and climate change. The leader of the NDP's sub-amendment to the reply to the speech from the throne included proposals to present realistic, structured, and concrete changes to benefit some of Canada's most vulnerable citizens, such as increasing the guaranteed income supplement, reducing taxes on the first income tax bracket, introducing a $15 an hour federal minimum wage, and reforming the employment insurance program. While it is unfortunate that this House voted against this sub-amendment, I am proud of our leader for carrying on the tradition of offering proposals that will truly help our fellow Canadians. Madam Speaker, my riding of Cowichan-Malahat-Langford covers 4,700 square kilometres of spectacular Vancouver Island in beautiful British Columbia. It is home to ancient First Nations cultures, including the Pacheedaht and the Dididat on the west coast, the Malahat to the south, the Halalt, the Penelakut, and the Chemainus to the north, and the largest band in British Columbia, Cowichan tribes. Many of these First Nations communities saw record turnouts during the election because they were inspired to bring about much-needed change to our federal government. During the election, the Liberals made specific promises towards new nation-to-nation relationship and substantial investment in First Nations education and child and family services. Repairing our relationship with Canada's Indigenous peoples and working towards true reconciliation must be a priority for this government, and it is something which we in the NDP will be pushing for in the coming months. Madam Speaker, I would be remiss if I did not mention the wonderful communities that make up my riding: Chemainus, Crofton, the District of North Cowichan, the City of Duncan, the Town of Lake Cowichan, Port Renfrew, Cowichan Bay, Cobble Hill, Shawnigan Lake, Mill Bay, the District of Highlands, and the City of Langford. Each of these places has a proud history and are filled with wonderful people who give true meaning to the word community. There are many issues that are extremely important to the constituents of my riding. Many of the mills on Vancouver Island have been closing down, and the families that depend on them for jobs have suffered because of the continuing increase in the export of raw logs. We need to see an investment and innovation in value-added manufacturing for our wood sector to make sure that good jobs stay in local communities. Yes. With respect to climate change, we are already seeing the effects in my riding with summer droughts and low snowpacks that are seriously affecting local rivers. In particular, the Cowichan River dropped to dangerously low flow rates, endangering the salmon spawning runs and risking the shutdown of the local Catalyst pulp mill in Crofton. I will be pressing the new government for investment to raise the weir in Lake Cowichan so that our community can hold back more water supply for the Cowichan River during these summer droughts. Madam Speaker, the time for talk is over. We need serious and firm emission reduction targets to combat climate change, and we need a plan to get us there. Continuing on the theme of water, the community of Shawnigan Lake is rallying against a contaminated soil dump that threatens their watershed. Although it is the provincial government that is responsible for the granting of the permit, I would like to see the federal government take a leadership role in protecting our water resources, as there are serious risks to fish and fish habitat that are supposed to be protected under the Federal Fisheries Act. Agriculture and food security are also two issues of great importance to the residents of my riding. The Cowichan Valley is blessed with a beautiful climate. It is roughly translated as the warm land in the Hulkaminam language, and there is a very real connection between local farmers, the food they produce, and consumers. Over the last several years, the NDP has developed a pan-Canadian food strategy titled From Farm to Fork, and I know that my constituents would certainly like to see the government work on the recommendations of this strategy. Many of my constituents also actively campaigned against the previous government's Bill C-51, and sadly there has been no indication from the Liberal government on repealing this horrendous Conservative legislation. More than 100 of Canada's brightest legal experts from institutions across the country expressed their deep concern about C-51. They called it a dangerous piece of legislation in terms of its potential impacts on the rule of law, constitutionally and internationally protected rights, and the health of Canada's democracy. In the south end of my riding, the city of Langford is home to many young families who cannot afford to live in Victoria. Not only are they struggling with high housing costs, but many are juggling the need to find work with finding adequate childcare. It is not just the high costs of childcare, but it is the lack of available spots. Unfortunately, the Liberal child benefit does nothing to address the lack of childcare spots in this country. Madam Speaker, I am honoured to stand here as the NDP's critic for seniors issues. The population of seniors is expected to grow significantly over the next 2 decades, and we urgently need a plan in place to meet their needs and ensure that everyone can age with dignity. A national strategy on aging, one that covers health care, home-based and hospice palliative care, affordable housing, financial security, and quality of life is needed for Canada's seniors. On a final note, I would like to take the time to acknowledge that it is Robbie Burns Day here in Canada, and that Canadians all across the country will be celebrating. Burns was a friend of the underdog and the oppressed in every form, and his poetry was drawn from the everyday experiences of the common person. His poem about a mouse whose home was unwittingly destroyed played a part in shaping speeches given by Canadian social democratic politicians, including our first leader, the great Tommy Douglas. The tale of Mouseland that Tommy Douglas made famous was the story of electing people from the common folk to represent their interests instead of a government filled with people who were there simply to be in power. Yes, there are many things that the Liberals have promised, and I will be here with my colleagues fighting every day to hold them to account. We will also champion our vision, a vision of Canada without inequality. We are a social democratic party who believes that our seniors must be taken care of and that we can offer a better future for our children. We will fight for reconciliation with our Indigenous peoples and work to protect our environment. My constituents can count on me to stand up for their interests and to work with them in building a better Canada. And I know I have the great support of my honourable colleagues in this House, and I thank you for this opportunity to speak to the speech from the throne. Thank you.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires? The honourable member from Winnipeg North.
So thank you, Madam Speaker. I noticed the member made reference to child care, and I let the member know, and I applaud him on his comments on the speech, that in order to achieve a child care program that would be universal across Canada, one of the things you have to do is you have to work with the provinces. The last time that was done was actually during Paul Martin. Paul Martin did have an agreement with the provinces that would have seen an enhanced child care. Unfortunately, Madam Speaker, that was actually defeated by the combined opposition back then. Today, we have a Liberal Prime Minister that is very progressive in his thinking in terms of the need to get children out of poverty. And the biggest step in doing that is to introduce the Canada Child Benefit, which will put more money in the hands of the parents and children in terms of than ever has been before, Mr. Speaker, or Madam Speaker. I'm wondering if the member can just reflect on just how important it is that the Government of Canada give directly to those children through the Child Benefit Program, and how that's going to benefit children from coast to coast to coast because of that one initiative, which will deliver children out of poverty.
L'honorable député de Cowichan-Malahat-Langford.
The honourable member.
Well, I'd like to thank the honourable member for his question, but I would also like to offer a little bit of a correction on his comments. The previous Liberal government, it actually had a majority running from 1993 to about 2004, and I'm not sure exactly why you didn't get the job done during that time and instead blame it on a minority parliament. The fact is, Madam Speaker, I am a father of 3.5-year-old twins and many of the young families in my riding, and when I was out knocking on doors all last year, the one thing I kept on hearing over and over and over again is we need to have affordable childcare and we need to have the spots. Many families are simply facing a situation where they cannot afford to get a second job. Getting that second job that only pays minimum wage simply does not match the cost of childcare. And while I certainly welcome any financial assistance that comes to young families, I don't think it actually personally goes far enough, and we have the research to back that up. Thank you.
I just want to remind the member and all members of the House, when you are speaking in the House, you are addressing your comments to the Speaker and not to individual members. Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. The honourable member from Kamloops, Thompson, Caribou.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And as a fellow British Columbian, I'd like to welcome the new member from Cowichan-Malahat-Langford. And he did mention something early in his speech, and he talked about the need for reconciliation. And I think all members in this House agree that we need to move forward in terms of our relationship with First Nations. The recommendations from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, there's 94 of them, and the government has said they are going to move ahead with all 94. I would like to ask the member, in our pursuit of reconciliation, will he join me in calling on the government to release a full costing and an analysis of the implications of moving forward with all 94 recommendations? Again, many of them are very excellent, but I think some will be leading us down a particularly difficult path.
The honourable member from Cowichan-Malahat-Langford.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. Of course, I think looking at the costs of every program is important. It's important that we as parliamentarians do our due diligence in holding the government to account. But I don't think that's the end-all in our pursuit of reconciliation with Canada's Indigenous peoples. I am blessed in my particular riding with many different First Nations bands, and I have listened to their counsel, and I include among them many of my friends. I think with Canada's history over a century long of the mistreatment of our First Peoples, that we need to go above and beyond looking at a simple price tag and go the full way, because I think through that renewed relationship with Canada's First Peoples, we are actually going to see a lot more economic benefits flowing their way, and I know that's what many of them are speaking to me about, so thank you.